Commission meeting for May 18th. We'll start with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So with that, we'll go ahead and do roll call.
Jeff Penzine is not here. Angela Willis,
Here.
David Newbill,
Here.
Lynn Shank,
Yes, ma'am.
Dan Crimmins,
Here.
Keith Wiederholt,
Here.
Mike Donlin.
Here.
Jeff is excused.
All right, so next topic. We're gonna do the approval of today's agenda. I will just make a comment. I assume this is what it is. There's just a typo. I gotta do a second take. I think you meant to say Renaissance Festival.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, I'm like reissuance.
Re-students? Re-students?
But that's okay.
Re-issuance.
I make a motion, we accept.
Second.
And approve of the day's agenda for May 18th, 2026.
That's it.
Okay. Got a motion and a second, so. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? All right, minutes, or, agenda's approved. We'll move on to item number 5, which is approval of the planning commission meeting minutes from April 27th, 2026. I'll open it up for discussion and concerns.
Just one correction on there. I know on the, oh lordy, where was I? The board discussion regarding survey questions, the roll call vote was all yeses, but I had a no on that.
What page?
Page 3. Madam Chair, that's all.
So with that, there was one no, which was you on the roll call.
Yes.
If there are no other corrections, can I make a motion that we approve the regular PC meeting minutes for April 26th, 2026?
And that's including
The correction of Michael?
So, okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Who second?
Aye.
Who second?
David.
Yep, David, sorry, I should have said. Okay, motion's approved. And again, that's pending a correction, that's noted on page 3 regarding the roll call. Okay. We have no public hearings, so we're gonna move on with that. Technically, no new business, which will jump into item number 8, which is basically gonna be the bulk of our discussion today. We're gonna kick it off probably with a simpler subject first and start with visioning boards. So I think in everyone's packet, we've got printouts of the different visioning boards, one regarding opportunities, one regarding threats, weaknesses, as well as strengths. And I believe the purpose of these boards is basically having folks place a sticker by their top priority. If you want to,
Yep, so that'll be available at the May 20th. We're having the event that's here, and so those will be put on the walls and people can come in and vote on those or verify their highest priority of those.
Will they be color coded, like the opportunities would be a blue one and for weaknesses a red? So someone doesn't take their 4 and just put them all on one category?
I think the best thing is to do the honor system, is to simply say, please put one sticker on each of these
Okay.
boards, just to make sure that, all of a sudden someone just wasn't paying attention to the stickers that they were using, and then they don't have theirs voted. I haven't had too many where people do,
Okay,
overly vote, but if that's how you wanna spend your votes, I guess, to make sure it's a clear priority, this is my strength, then we're encouraging one on each, but if they were to do that, I don't know that would cause an issue.
okay. You have experience, I don't. Nothing, thank you.
So you said May 20th, is it only May 20th or?
Nope, so they'll be up for the next month is the plan. So if people meander into the township hall, they're welcome to participate, but the big public event is in 2 days on Wednesday.
And then there'll be a check-in if you get your votes, so that their name is crossed off, they can't come back 50, 16, 20 times.
We will have a sign-in sheet. I don't know that anyone's gonna be super checking it out, but we are gonna be encouraging
Okay.
people to sign it, yes.
And are your things distinguished? The stickers? Are they just, you know,
They have a unique number, you mean?
right, a unique feature about them?
Nope.
Okay.
Madam Chair? Just one thing, I don't know if I'm overly complicating this, but, you know, one thing that came to mind is I may have a couple priorities on these boards, and, I know it's one sticker by your top priority, but I've also seen it where you had, you know, red, yellow, green being, or some type of code for top 1, 2, and 3. And putting your stickers top 1, 2, 3 on each board, so you at least have that semblance, so that, because I know when I look at these various topics on the board, which are great, I have no question on the topics, I always want to go, well, that's not my priority. Well, that, you know, and kind of waffle between the two, it allows a little bit more flexibility. I don't know if we decide to just do one because of ease, or if it's some other, if that's an opportunity to put one or 2 or 3 stickers on there, top 1, 2, and 3 priorities, might give us some information too as well.
I can think about that, and talk to township staff. I think my main concern is the quantity of people they're expecting to participate, and so then I'm gonna need 3 sheets to then tabulate or keep track of how many people are coming and then submitting the 1, 2, 3. But if that is a high priority, that's something we can investigate.
Madam
Go ahead.
Chair, how is the general public gonna be notified that this is going on? Is it by the sign out here, or email, or
I'm not sure.
who knows?
Danielle?
Anybody know?
I thought they were sending something out in the newsletter with the tax statements, but I haven't received mine, so I don't know if we can that, what was in that newsletter.
I can't hear what you're saying.
There's a newsletter was being sent out with the tax statements, but I don't know, I haven't received mine, so I don't know what was in it.
Neither have I.
Is there at least, but it'll at least be on our website, right?
I believe so.
And then, don't we have a Facebook page or something like that too? So we need to probably just we can get follow-up with Kevin or someone to make sure that there's something at least posted on Facebook, as well as updating our website.
Madam Chair, suggestion, I know we do public notices in the Citizen,
Yes.
which a lot of people do see and read through. In fact, I've kind of followed it a little bit over the years. I don't know if that's an opportunity where Dave Fleetwood, you know, put it under a public notice, saying that starting May 20th, you know, through, you know, June 20th, come into the township offices and, you know, look at the, you know, call it a, I don't know.
Community priority.
Community priority event, and just do it a public notice, and maybe even run it 2 weeks in a row, and go that route, because I know people do see that in the Citizen when they read it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
a lot of people right here have said they don't get the Citizen.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
No, I was surprised
Well,
too.
that's why I'm thinking a multitude of things, you know, whether it's a Citizen, and then Facebook, having that updated, the website, sounds like we get some kind of confirmation, make sure that indeed there's a
We
newsletter
have a-
with their tax statement.
Do we have a township-wide email list yet?
They are continuing adding to it, that I'm aware of.
Yeah, we need May 20th is literally this Wednesday.
2 days.
So, yeah, I mean.
Well, so the community event's already happening, my understanding, and they've been advertising it. So part of it is getting that passive initial, like intake for it. That's my understanding. That was our real big event. We wanted to ensure that people were coming
Or
here
are they even
anyway.
advertising, because if it was supposed to be in a newsletter and tax statement, those haven't even been received.
But it's gonna be up for a month,
The
so,
20th is a citizen.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Supposed to be activity on the 20th, the shredding and the fire trucks.
True,
Okay.
but it wasn't about the board.
It's gonna be a surprise when you show up and get the new stickers in.
Danielle, is there anything that they're going to announce on Wednesday? Hey,
I don't know.
okay. Because with people here, a lot of people, it might, hey, come in here and do something.
yep, so the boards aren't like stapled to anything, so, wherever they need to be set up so then they're viewable, that is the plan.
Alright.
So more on that then, we can inquire with the township and see what they're doing.
Here's my take on it being that it's going to be up for a month. We don't get a lot of turnout in like a week and a half, then we need to think hard in terms of getting the message out to the public. Because it doesn't sound like, it sounds like the citizen, but it's not really direct, in terms of these boards. Sounds like other events going on. There was indication of a newsletter in the tax statements, but I checked my mail too, and I don't see a tax statement. So the bottom line is we need to make sure that the public is getting notified in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, they're gonna be sitting here with these folks in the room, and that's it, because they're the ones that know about it. So we need to monitor by looking at those sign-in sheets.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm getting back on the stickers real quick before we move on. I'm with his concern in terms of, and maybe it's not 3, maybe it's 2, but there may be a bunch of people where they're struggling on picking one versus another. So I would at least please consider 2.
Okay.
If 3 is going to be a little difficult, I would strongly think about allowing them to do 2.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else regarding the boards? You good?
Ask if everybody agrees with the two. Is it supposed to be 2 readings?
Yeah, well, do we need to make a motion regarding the 2 stickers versus 1, or in terms of recommending, does everyone agree?
I agree.
Okay. You okay, everyone okay with that?
Yeah, I agree with the comments that have been made.
Okay,
Good.
okay, thank you. Alright,
So that was more of a general consensus.
yeah.
Is that
for you
okay?
to look
Okay.
into,
Yep.
yes,
Alright.
yes.
Just checking you didn't want it to be a formal motion.
No,
Okay.
at first I was thinking, it's like, no, let's just talk it through, make sure everyone's good,
Okay, very good.
okay? Alright, so with that, I'm gonna move on unless anyone's got anything else regarding the boards. Okay, alright. Now, the next big topic is a bucket called alternative energy, and I just wanna preface this to the board before we dive into this. And I think some of you were at the joint board and planning commission meeting earlier in the year. We had a discussion around BES, the while and all that. Back then, I made a statement of something for us to consider, which would be hardwiring, battery energy storage systems along with solar panels, everything under a bucket of alternative energy, hardwiring it into the ordinance versus going down the path for a while. And I'm not shopping this today, but after talking with Caitlin, I thought that it would make sense that we put all this under the bucket of alternative energy. Caitlin, being that we thought this could be a straightforward shot, and could give us some lessons learned in terms of addressing the battery energy storage, system piece. She has gone through and put together a draft regarding solar systems, which could be her first piece that builds into this alternative energy umbrella. So it made sense to bring that forward today for us to go through and discuss. And she highlighted areas for us to go through and discuss to figure out, okay, what's her thoughts regarding, for example, setbacks, things of that nature, and then also to the overall layout and nature of the document. And then from there, hopefully we can take those lessons and apply it to what we want to do about this in terms of shoring that up and working out something that's protecting our community and making sure we've got safety in mind and looking at something like that. So with that, I'll hand it over to Caitlin, but I just wanted to address the board in terms of the approach and why the agenda was ultimately updated to reflect that.
So, dated is the May 13th letter. I think that might be the easiest point to kind of follow along. Otherwise, the next thing I would have next to is the draft language. So it's one of 16 different pages. And so as we're talking through these different major topics, I plan on making changes to that potential draft. And I think as we flag different things, if there's something we want to chew on, that's okay. We're not making firm decisions tonight, but we're trying to figure out, okay, how many of these options do we need or want? What do we still want to chew on and think about for next meeting? That way we're taking a giant list, which is anything regarding solar energy collectors and their systems, to making it into something that's very bite-sized and we can put our arms around it. So the first kind of thing is talking about there's a difference between on-site solar and commercial grade solar. So that's kind of how I'm trying to put it into two different buckets. You have your on-site solar, which is really an accessory use. You're a single family home and you put some solar panels up. You're a commercial or industrial building, you put some solar panel up. That's on site. Anything that's off-site where your main purpose is to feed the grid and get income off of that, that's utility grade scale, and that's that commercial grade scale. So thinking of solar on the on-site basis, there's four different ways you can look at on-site solar collector systems, and they all have technical nuances to them. So there is the ground mounted, everyone can picture what that looks like. That's the most straightforward. Then you have roof mounted, so this is where it's only on the roof part of a building. Then you have building mounted, so it has to be attached to a building, so anything that has poles or a wall that have a roof or support a roof. It can be columns or whatnot. So this would mean a building, it could be the side, the front face of a building. I'm not sure if you're aware of seeing some of those, where it's the front side of a building. It's not just the roof, it's the sides. I haven't seen it very often, but there are different things where you project from the side of the house rather than being on the roof, whatever the case is. And then you have structure mounted. This is less frequent, but if somebody wanted to have a fence, or if they wanted to have a sign, they could mount the solar panel to the sign without hardwiring it. And then they would mount it to the sign, and then that's a structure mounted. It's attached to something above the surface. So the first policy question is, one, how do we feel about all of those types? And should they be regulated significantly differently? So some communities, they say we don't like structure mounted, and others say we don't mind if it's mounted to a sign, but other structures we're a little leery of. Any thoughts?
I think, the one thing that jumps out is the ground mounted, to me, just my opinion, to me, that should be an area of regulation, because you start getting into setbacks and things of that nature, obviously.
Mhm.
So that one really jumps out. The structure mounted, I think it's within reason, to me, it all depends on what the structure is at the end of the day. So I think it's one of those where that one's a tough one, because it's like, okay, what are the common structures that this would be? And the first thing that comes to my mind is the signs, right? That's from a commercial space, is usually it's a sign. So that one, I've got like a big question mark, where I'm just not sure. If anyone wants to comment.
At MSU, they build structures over the parking lots.
So like a parking structure?
Yeah, so it's really it's just poles with panels on them that make a roof basically
Okay.
over the parking.
Okay.
So we would call that ground mounted.
Would that be considered ground mounted?
Correct.
Mounted?
Because
Even
it's
though
the
parking
main
structure?
solar, so the main solar system is mounted to a pole or something that is then the roof part of that structure.
Okay.
So that would be considered ground mounted.
It's still ground mounted. Okay.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification on these solar types, these 4 solar types. Are we talking about them as they relate to a commercial facility, a commercial building, or are we talking about them for commercial and residential use? The reason why I asked that question is, these ground mounted or structure mounted or side mounted to a residential home, really, are we talking about regulating that? I think that gets into the minutia, because it's really getting into, I think there's only so much you can do, so many solar panels you can do as an accessory to the residential structure, right?
Right.
So when I look at what we're talking about here, I'm really thinking that this is in relationship to commercial properties, not residential properties. Am I correct on that?
Communities regulate both. And it,
Communities regulate both.
yep, so it is up to each jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions, they say they're okay with single family having ground mounted or roof mounted as long as it doesn't exceed X size. And it's all an administrative process. You don't need a lot of oversight.
Yeah.
As communities have dealt with this technology, because it's no longer new, more and more move to an administrative review process where we just want to know about those facilities. And I'll kind of look over at our fire support. But some people, some communities have concern with, because it is a fire hazard, that they at least want notification these are going up beyond just an electrical permit.
Yeah.
And so that's why some communities still have some type of administrative review for these facilities, just to ensure beyond electrical code that the fire department feels aware of what's going on. I'm not sure where the township sits on that regulatory specific question, but it is a question of, you could regulate these in residential, you could say, you know what, we're not going to regulate these in residential, or if it's in commercial, we are or we aren't.
So, doesn't our building permits, the electrical code, regulate these things already for residential uses?
Correct.
So, I guess where I'm going with is that I don't wanna over-regulate in residential areas, but when it comes to a commercial property, whether that be a structured building, ground mounted, or solar farm, that commercial grade, I can see our business owners wanting to put a whole array up on their roof so that they can sell back to DTE. Well, that, I don't know how advantageous that is, but,
Do that.
huh? I don't think they do that,
No.
but
Well,
I
they-
can see that, from a commercial sense, that would be important to have that regulation. So I'm trying to ascertain between residential and commercial.
Yeah, and
When I say commercial business, business types, not residential properties.
And I agree with you on that. I think the only thing I would have a concern on is when it comes to ground mount, just making, and I don't think this is spelled out in terms of the electric code, and maybe it is, but just regarding setbacks on adjacent property lines, that's all.
It would not.
Only the wiring is covered by the electrical, code. That's
Okay.
gonna be by NEC, by the National Electric
Yeah.
Code, not, that's what we follow.
Yeah. Good.
But the commercial, large scale commercial ones are all post mounted or like.
Highlanded.
Yeah, that's,
Cause there's nothing else there, like farm fields, there's no
Right.
structures for them, so they generally are.
now, here's the other twist to this though, too, is, cause you got residential, right? But then you may have, let's say that Rite Aid structure, that's on the corner there, let's say that turns into some business, and they want solar panels on, let's say, their roof. So what about handling businesses, not residential, not something that's necessarily commercial, where it's feeding back and, to the grid, but someone that's using it truly for supplement, that's
Now
business.
that's an interesting question, which is that, in that situation, are they keeping that electricity on the property or are they selling it back to the grid? Cause commercial utility scale is different.
Right,
Correct, so it would still be considered on-site, for our definition because of the purposes. So DTE, is that the provider for electricity? Yeah. So they already, when you go through those companies, they already ensure that you are not going to feed over into the grid significant amount. There is a payback component to them, but they are not going to let you have a facility that connects to that overcapacity level. They deny individual property owners or commercial or industrial operations where you exceed that, because they don't want to lose their customer in a way. That's just how politics are, but taking that step back. So really what it usually comes down to is aesthetic and setback concerns, what level of oversight you want over these facilities as
yeah,
well.
because that's the thing, that's kind of, because of that on-site, you got businesses lumped in there. So the question is maybe, and if folks are, if we do want to split that a little bit where we have more latitude with residential, but yet for a commercial industrial setting where you're not feeding back into the grid, you fall under that on-site, maybe there's a little bit more. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Maybe that's a situation, we're using that Rite Aid as an example. They don't have a lot of space on the ground. You need to have so many
Right,
panels to make.
so
it-
maybe with them, they
make it
would be on the
possible.
roof
So,
or on the
yeah,
side.
it would have to be maybe within their building perimeter.
Right.
But
But do we want to scrutinize a business more so than a residential? You know, and we don't have to answer that today, but it's something that we probably need to think about. You brought up a good question on the definition.
And,
I was just gonna brief preface it up, I'm just anti-regulation, anybody in this room, I'm anti-government. But we regulate how people's barns look. You have to have regulation on these for residential. I've got a 1,200-foot property line, if I run these things the whole property line, it's gonna be an eyesore if I have them on my front yard facing the roof there. So you're gonna have aesthetics for the environment. And I think you also, along with the awareness that we have to have, people might not just be powering, their fans that run that. They could build battery storage units in their barn and be using a multitude of solar panels to charge batteries in the barn, which is fine, but I think we need to have some kind of,
Some
regulation on that and oversight on that.
I agree, and part of in a residential area, we have setbacks already for accessory uses. Modifying our code for those accessory uses when it comes to solar panels could be accomplished as an amendment to that portion, where you have size restrictions on the array that you put for a residential home, and then let it be that way, so you're not getting the instance where you get it all the way along the whole property line. The other answer to your question too earlier, Madam Chair, was, with regards to businesses themselves, I consider businesses or commercial uses, so such as our zoning districts for business, is more applicable to the on-site solar types versus residential. I think a residential, so that we're not trying to overregulate, can be handled through the accessory, as an accessory to the use for residential, still meeting those setbacks. I think it, whatever was it for, it depends, it varies between the zoning districts for residential, but, 10 and 40 feet is a setback, I recall reading through there. So those would be guidance on that, and then the only thing I think that would be a whole would be the actual size of the array. It can't be more bigger than, X kilowatts, for doing, still know how to handle the battery size of that portion, but.
Yeah, but that could get addressed
I
when we
just don't-
start getting into the battery energy storage portion of this whole blanketed alternative energy. Cause you could split that out with residential versus commercial.
You could, yes. So I guess that's what I wanna get my head around, Madam Chair, is that we're talking commercial facilities when we're looking at this, and handle other things as an accessory use to the residential side of things.
Well, and that's what we can do. Well, and she'll jump into like her draft, right? And I think right in her draft, it's very,
Yeah, when we get
Related
into
to
like the
commercial. We'll
specifics
get
on
into
ground
that.
mounted, but for some communities, the answer is absolute no. So I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out from this body is,
And-
do you want to allow solar panels on the side of a building? If the answer is no, then we don't provide a definition for that and say you can do it.
see, I don't
Or we don't
agree
care.
with just saying no either, because, I mean, there's again, getting to residential, there's options. If they can't do it on the roof and they need something sun facing,
Mhm.
sometimes the side's the only alternative.
Alright, so it sounds like general consensus is that we're okay with it being on the building. So the question is would that be an administrative process or would you want more oversight?
Madam Chair, I think in a commercial sense, we have a little bit more oversight. I think that's where, and I don't, the four types that you, on-site solar types that you mentioned in your letter, I don't think that, I think it needs to be a little bit more oversight on a commercial business sense than a residential sense. I don't have objections just because of the versatility of the four different types, because like you said, some buildings would require a side mount, some require, a solar array to keep a light on a sign maybe, who knows? So that's a structure mounted, so I think it needs some oversight on the commercial side.
So my 2 cents on it would be, for residential, it would be an administrative review, but it's single family residential, not getting into the multifamily. And then anything beyond that, we have to come in for.
And we're gonna get to the specific districts and
But-
things of that.
But you're asking the question of, should it be an administrative review?
Mhm.
My opinion is that for single family residents, yes, everything else, no. Go ahead.
I don't understand what this administrative review is versus. what's the
So
alternative?
an administrative review would be similar to like a zoning permit, so the intention is someone to walk in, they provide like a sketch plan to say, hey, this is where I'm gonna put in my solar facility, or here's my sketch for my contractor that's gonna put the solar panel on the roof, and then it's reviewed administratively. Typically, it's done by your building official because they understand the technical nuances of electrical code and things of that nature, and then I'm just not very familiar with how the building review and the fire department work in that review process to ensure that there is that cross formulation, and that's why some communities require the zoning portion just to verify that that communication is happening as part of that permitting process, to ensure that everyone's aware of that improvement, and then checking compliance with the zoning ordinance, because the building official is going to look at building official code compliance, but if we make specific rules on those type facilities in the zoning ordinance, it needs to be clear that somebody checked that, and that's why you would have a simple permit. So it would all be handled in-house within the staff, typically your building official, because your building official permits accessory buildings.
But we're still working off of ordinance, that's what's being
Correct.
referred to.
Yep. Absolutely. Because I guess what I'm trying to tease out is If we're allowing building mounted, then we don't need a unique definition for roof mounted. If we're considering those kind of in the same ballpark, then we don't need a unique roof, because every roof mounted would be building mounted. So that's all I'm trying to kind
Oh, I
of
see what you're saying.
ascertain is, don't put definitions we don't need.
Yeah.
So if that's the general consensus that we're okay with it being building mounted, we don't need roof, so I'll delete roof.
Okay.
Okay. So I think otherwise we're okay with the other 3 types. And so then we go into commercial grade. So I recommend having 2 different types. So there's your medium and your large. Part of it being is if for whatever reason they were to have a capacity size that's under the 233, clearly stating these are the requirements, they are essentially treated the same. But what we try to do is just acknowledge that if you're a large facility, you do qualify under that the Public Act 233, and you could have that state process. Some communities just put it all in one. I think more commonly you see it in the 2 baskets. Is there any concern about that?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
remind me, Caitlin, what the, PA 233 minimum capacity is, it 50 megawatts or 50?
That sounds right, but I don't remember off memory.
Okay.
Apologize.
So what basically you're saying is that let's just hypothetically say it's 50 megawatts or less is a medium-sized facility. So that's your definition for a medium-sized facility.
Correct. And you can only
And-
do local.
And you only could do, what do you mean by local?
The local process for zoning. You'd have to
Local.
meet this local
Correct.
zoning ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
And then anything higher than 50 megawatts, it would be, and that's hypothetical, would be the large facilities that would be subject also to the Public Act 233. Got it.
Yep, and you would still push our local. We're still looking at having a workable ordinance,
Yep.
in which we're creating our own unique standards that we're hoping they would like to do as opposed to doing the state process. Okay, so that brings me to page 2 of our, I guess, drafting guide, essentially, where we're gonna look at the various different districts, and say, what do we think it should, if it should be prohibited in that district, if it should be permitted, which means by right. So for all of our commercial installations, that would mean a full site plan review. For our on-site, we can choose what districts, but you could have that more administrative process I articulated, or you could say you do want the planning commission to have it. Some of my communities do have it based on size, but I can tell you more likely than not that is a forever changing technology war, because what size was appropriate then, different size now, different houses, different size. And overall, if you have good screening requirements or good aesthetic requirements, you're more or less able to have the end product community goal that you're looking for. And then there's your special land use, which requires review by your planning commission, requires a public notice in the newspaper, but also everyone within 300 feet gets a notice as part of that review process. So the first district would be our REF, and if we wanted to consider medium and large, it's commonplace that you would have those as special land uses in that more agricultural setting. That's typically where these projects like to be.
On page 2, number 5, impact statement reports.
I'm not there yet.
Oh, we're not there
Okay.
yet. We're not reviewing that. We're still on
Page 1?
Page 2, 3.3 rates, residential agriculture district, REF. Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Again, this goes back to the residential thing. You know, in this zoning district, I know that large agricultural tracts can be used for solar farms. So I think that anything like industrial use, medium, or industrial uses, anything medium or large commercial solar energy should be some type of special land use according to, in this district, period. That would come to the planning commission for review, for understanding and all that. Likewise, what we just had the conversation on the other side in the residential agricultural district, those would be administrative reviews on the buildings and other things. So that's kind of what my thoughts would be.
No, I would agree with that. However, I would even take it a step further and prohibit it in single-family residential districts, as an example, things of that nature where it's clear that you're not going to put in a medium size.
Yeah, I think she had,
You
I'm sorry,
see what I'm saying?
Yep,
Yeah.
so then I'm on the next page, which is 3.4.
3.4.
I do not propose any of the commercial in that template. It's super uncommon to be there, so that's a no.
Okay.
And so the question would be is, do you think those should, removing roof mounted, those 3 should also be administrative review processes?
For single family residential, yes.
Next is 3.5, multiple family residential districts. Also no commercial grade facilities, all on site.
Right. But here, I think, would require a more formal review. And the reason why you say that is those are gonna tend to be larger in scale, being that it is considered multifamily. It's not administrative, even though we don't really have much of that here, but if we end up with, let's just say we end up with an apartment building, small complex someplace where they're entertaining it, I would think that we would want some kind of oversight in that case.
So would that be, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, would that be special land use, or would that be, what was the 3? Give me, help me out.
Permitted.
Permitted, for, review, right?
I would say permitted, because that would require the site plan and all that, right?
Yeah, but it would have to come before the planning
Yeah, oh,
commission
yeah.
and stuff for doing that. Am I correct in that when you say permitted? Okay, I just, because there's a difference between permitted and special land use. Special land use opens up a whole nother, aspect of requirements that, for whether that's, it could even go into aesthetics at that point. But, I mean, this is, I think that you could allow the solar array in a multiple family, but it'd be permitted for planning commission
With the
review.
site plan review, yes.
Site plan review.
So even for building mounted, you want a site plan,
Yeah.
because the structure's already there, has to meet all of our setbacks. You still wanna see it here, even if that's the only improvement.
Yeah, because we're gonna have requirements along those lines regarding if it's roof mounted, the maximum height, for example.
Yep.
You know, things of that nature.
And you would like it reviewed at the planning commission, not administratively.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll start playing.
So my question would be, but if you put a requirement in the ordinance that covers both single family and multifamily, it says the largest solar panel you can have is a 2x2 square. Exaggeration. If you're already controlling for that in the ordinance, would you have to do that for multiple family if they're both required to meet the same size and aesthetics as a single family?
I don't think necessarily so. There's nothing saying that they wouldn't be equal in terms of requirements. I would think that the single-family residential would be a little bit, would be less stringent than a multifamily. So again, you can break it out. It does not have to, you can have differing requirements for a single family versus a multifamily. You can break that out separately.
I guess what I was thinking is if you have one ordinance that covers all residential,
It won't be broad brush, is my point. So you would have an area for single family residential, an area for multifamily.
but if you wrote the same requirements for all.
That doesn't necessarily need to be.
But then if they wanted multifamily, because it said the building was bigger, if they wanted to exceed what was allowed in residential, then they would have to come in and,
For a variance.
right, that's not a way to control that, or?
So typical language that's already drafted in is talking about how the building mounted can't be 2 feet from the side of the building or 5 feet above, still can't exceed the maximum height. So the question is if it is that straightforward, does this body need to see it as opposed to it being handled administratively?
Well, I think it gets back to, again,
Because we can't deny it because it's a special
No,
land use
I
because
know.
of aesthetics and once you get into like the more subjective stuff, it's very cut and dry.
but I think with that, you have to be careful on the aesthetics, for one thing, right? When you start getting into these larger, like the multifamily residentials, right? So you talk about, for example, the privacy fence or a green barrier for aesthetics. gonna be much more,
Concerning.
really gonna be a concern with the larger building, because let's face it, they're gonna take more panels at the end of the day. If it's ground mounted, as an example.
Sure.
The fire code is another example. Granted, it, to me, at least from my limited knowledge of fire code, I would think it would be a bit more complex, because once again, you're gonna require more panels to service a multifamily unit versus a single family residential. So to me, it's just ratcheting it up a level. Go ahead.
Dan, I wanna agree with you on over-regulating and trying to keep things similar.
Yeah.
But in a multifamily sense, I'll just paint an example. If I'm a landlord and I own an apartment complex that has 30 units in it, right? And I want to cut my utility bills down, I wanna put a solar array up that can handle those units. That's a much larger array than a single-family residential, is what I would see as a multifamily. I don't know if I painted that picture correctly, but that's why I'm kind of more of the line saying in a multifamily residential district, it would be a permitted use as long as they come before the planning commission, just to make sure that we're not putting something up that's not aesthetically, conforming and meets the setbacks and all that stuff. So that's kind of what my thought was on the multifamily residential. So I don't know if that helps at all, but that's kind of the picture I thought of it too, because I don't wanna overregulate myself.
I'm in the same boat too. It's just, I still get a little nervous, and you don't really have. But who knows, that time could eventually get here where we do end up with like a larger apartment complex in Groveland Township. I hope not, but if we do, that is an area.
Well, we have the one right there by Mount Holly.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
And
that's
it's
all
small.
apartment complexes right there, that's got
Right.
20 units in it maybe.
Yeah,
So those, as a landlord, I could say, hey, what do we do with my utility bill? I don't know if it's worth it, but, that's something that I think we would want to see from a use district.
Is that general consensus?
Yes.
it's everybody's thoughts.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
we just can constrain.
I think it makes,
Yeah, I know.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I think it makes sense what Mike was saying. You should differentiate it because you could have a large apartment complex and, a 3-bedroom
Yeah.
ranch, and they're completely different buildings. So I think they should be differentiated. That's my 2 cents.
I think we have consensus.
Okay, so next is your mobile home residential district.
I would lump this under the multifamily. I mean, I think, again, coming for approval, now, hold on though, we have to slow down a little bit. So, the mobile home residential district, does that mean the mobile home park itself is putting in a system, or individuals?
Anything that's that zoning district, we're not doing it based on use.
Not doing one.
We're not doing it based on the use. It's what's ever in that zoning district. So we do allow single-family homes under our mobile home residential district. Granted, I think we only have mobile home parks currently in those districts.
No, you're not understanding what I'm saying.
Okay.
So, if I'm living in a mobile home park.
Yep.
And I wanna put up solar for my mobile home.
Ah.
I usually work with the mobile home park manager to make sure, being that I'm leasing the space, right?
Yep.
I own the home.
Yep.
But I wanna put a panel up, or set panels up.
Yep.
I wouldn't think we should be regulating that. However, if it's a mobile home park that wants to put up a structure or
Cover the parking
around,
lot.
right, something along those lines,
Power the.
then I think that's a little different. So you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. So one of the parts of that is whatever they choose as a facility operator, so similar to an HOA, and if you equivalent similar ideas, if an HOA says you're not allowed to have ground-mounted solar panels, my HOA would be no. that's something that's up to each of those individual. We would have no say in that. That's a private property agreement. Some, they cover utilities, others they don't. So we wouldn't have say in that, other than if we put regulations in that park, we would be saying you have to meet whatever your local agreement is, but you also have to meet the township requirements as well. And if we do it for mobile home parks in that association type capacity, we really should be doing that the same way in single family with their HOA type associations as well. Where we don't just say, because you're part of this association, we no longer regulate you.
No, but to me, they would just be considered single-family residential, each individual mobile home. They just work appropriately with their.
So still keeping it administrative is kind of your
Yeah.
thinking? Okay.
However, if it's the mobile home park itself, so if I'm a park manager, or I own the mobile home park and I want to put up, let's say, a structure, that's different. Then that should require permit and site review, just like multifamily.
So,
Size.
so the, Madam Chair, just an example would be is if I had the mobile home park clubhouse and I wanted to put up an array to power the pool heaters and all that other
Yeah.
stuff that, that would require a permitted review.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I would say.
But I would, in what reference to Caitlin said, I think that HOAs and mobile home parks, they have their own regulations and they only have their own lot sizes and they have their own things. I think that they have those rules and regulations in there, and I bet you a lot of them don't address solar.
They probably don't.
But I'm inclined to kind of go with just looking at the district itself, mobile home, residential district, and use it and say permitted in the planning commission review, and go that route, because I think that, it's no different than a commercial application when you go put an array in for a clubhouse. I'm just gonna use that as a simple
Okay.
example. So I would just, instead of trying to break it down between the residents of that HOA or homeowners, or the homeowner itself, I would just say permitted.
Yeah, it was more of a question for me. It's like, what are we really referring to here? Are we referring to the district in and of itself, the park in and of itself, or are we getting into the new minutia in terms of trying to regulate individual mobile home owners that are leasing a lot from the park? That's where I was trying to figure out exactly what are we referring to. If we're just treating it as an overall district, whole grand scheme of things, that's fine with me. Does everyone agree? And I think to take that further with that, I would lump that under multifamily and consider that permitted going through here to get approval.
Okay, next is 3.7, which is the corridor commercial district. So again, no commercial grade is proposed there. It would be very uncustomary. And so the question would be is those would also be permitted, so they require oversight. So next is 3.9, which is light industrial. This is where we get into the medium and large commercial grade facilities. Some communities allow it in those districts, just due to space that's available in their community as opposed to it just being in the agricultural region. But we could say the higher and best use, which is a real estate terminology, would be to actually have industrial uses there. So you don't want to have them occupied by solar and you have to keep accessory. That is a very optional placement of commercial grade facilities. It wasn't the highest ranked in our community input event either.
And I don't know how we should address this, but I guess here's my take. I'm almost thinking that we only allow for medium commercial solar energy system if someone wishes to try in with a request for a large commercial solar energy system. That would therefore be a variance, take it through the variance process, something I'm open to, this is just something I'm thinking of, is somehow making sure that it's somewhat capped in the ordinance in terms of the amount of megawatt at the end of the day. Go ahead.
I think both should be special use. Simply because of,
Yeah,
because that will give you
Yeah.
it's no different than your agricultural residential. It's, you know, because there's
Yeah.
certain circumstances, high and best use, to your point. You know, if they're wanting to use these medium and large systems in there, I would do special use is what. And then the other building mounted and such for the light industrial would be permitted. That would require them to come before us.
right.
And part of the rationale too in some of these is trying to have reuse purposes for our mining operations. So mining operations are allowed in multiple different districts, industrial being one of them. And so this is an alternative use potentially for those type facilities. I think would be probably the most, because otherwise it's more beneficial for an actual building and a tenant to be developed from a real estate standpoint. But okay, is that a general consensus then with that?
Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah,
I think
that's a good idea.
Angela and I are completing the talking up here, and I'm looking at my fellow commissioners over here, Keith and Dan and Dave. You know, we
Fine.
on par.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So a special land use for medium and large commercial solar energy systems for light industrial. So it basically follows REM.
Mhm.
Okay.
Alright, so next is 310, which is our general industrial. So I would take a stab in the dark and say we're thinking the same thing.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
very good. So then we get into the recreation. Currently, I do not propose any commercial grade. Typically, when you're talking about commercial installations, they are clear cutting, and that is not the intent whatsoever of our recreational zoning district. And so we would only be looking on the on-site. So the question would be, is this your administrative route? Or would this be your permitted route? Or we can explore use-based residential if you wanted.
Gosh, this is a tough one. Go ahead.
Well, being in the recreational industry for 26 years, you know, I would love to see administrative review, then I can put up solar arrays on all of the park facilities and pavilions, you know, but, now putting my planning commission hat on, I would say, on contrary, I would probably want to go permitted
And
because
that's what I was thinking.
I just have to throw that out there because, you know, I can see that.
It gets back into the scale, right, in the vastness, that's all.
And from my experience in recreation, we have explored the opportunity to power a campground facility. And that becomes, you know, an array in and of itself when you're doing restrooms and things along that lines. I mean,
Or
I'll
glamping.
give you Groveland Oaks, I'll just pick on Groveland Oaks, because I know they have the large field out there in the south there, and we've looked at that. I've looked at that as a possible alternative to held utility bills for Groveland, but it's like, that would be a use that would have to go before the planning commission. Now, technically, the county doesn't have to come before the planning commission, but, you know, that's a whole other thing. But I would say permitted.
Everyone agree with that, or any other discussion around that one?
Okay, that is all the zoning district specifics. So now we're going into the site development study criteria. So this is new content. You don't currently have these studies, though you do reference a traffic impact study in different sections. You don't, your community doesn't specifically more go in depth on what those specifically mean. So I'm proposing 3 different types of reports. The intention of where they're being proposed to be located is they're not just used for commercial grade solar installations. They would be used for anything that's of a certain intensity. So this would be used for major subdivisions. This could be used for battery energy storage facilities. The more like you treat other similar uses, the more legally defensible you are. And so that's why it makes sense that this isn't just this special criteria. In any project, we're anticipating impact. We want to have the information to make good decisions. So there's 3 different types of reports. There's community impact statements, which is more talking about, and I'll go more item by item, but you're looking at general, what are the land use, is it compatible? You're talking about public utilities, you're talking about capacity on roadways and things of that nature to some extent. Then you have your environmental report, which is really talking about what is the underground water facility that's going to be using for that facility. You're going to be talking about any hazardous material that are on site. Then you have your traffic impact study, which is actually going to be looking at roadway capacity. That's going to be done in partnership with other authorities. So I guess the first part of this is what triggers a community impact statement. And so what the drafted language is, which is that applicability in the highlighted in yellow, is commonly communities say that if there's single family development that's 25 or more individual units, you may want to have something like this where you're evaluating, do we have enough, what is the school capacity, what is our fire capacity associated with adding this type of development. Others say 50 homes, some say 100 homes. You can really modify that number. The other part is that special land uses over 5 acres. That's a natural trigger for some communities. And rezonings over 5 acres that are not consistent with the master plan. So not even just when you're looking at actual site logistics. This is a report when a rezoning is taking place. So let's say a data center is coming and they want to rezone 50 acres. You would be able to ask, or you would require this report be generated to evaluate preliminarily these level of questions that are associated. Now, one of the content components that's associated with this is the Planning Commission can waive the entirety of these reports, or you can waive portion of these reports. Again, the idea is that we're trying to make general regulations, but not make it so specific that you're kicking yourself later because it's a very specific project. Yes, it's over 5 acres for special land use, but it's another ag entertainment. And so you don't need this level of oversight for something that's happening Friday through Saturday for 4 weeks. If you were to have another festival or special land use or something of that nature. So you wouldn't need that level of detail. So I guess next we can go into the actual content of those, but do you have a general idea of those are acceptable triggers, you like to chew on them, or do you have an opinion? I know one of the concerns during our public engagement with the master plan has been people are worried about large subdivisions coming into our community.
Yeah.
And that's why we usually keep that size of residential development in there.
Well, and we have the 2 subdivisions down in Grange Hall now. I mean, I would, and again, fellow board members, you can shoot me down. I actually would reduce that number from 25 to 10 to 15. Just to cover smaller subdivision.
Larger lots, fewer homes kind of thing.
Yeah. That's just my thought. I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in on that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
how is that 25 established? Is that just kind of a standard that has been with different zoning ordinances, or is that, I mean, how's it established?
So it's mainly based off of what other communities more or less find that carrying capacity associated with it. When you're looking at that, I believe our minimum lot size is what, that 1 acre, 2 acres. And so if you go into just the residential, it can go down to that 1/4 acre. And so you're looking at, from a little bit, once you get around that 5 acres, so at our smallest lots, we're looking at easily a subdivision that's over that 5 acre point for that 25 units or less in our smallest zoning district. So
My thought is, and I don't know, I think there are larger lot size here down the road, but even if you go with a 1/2 acre lot, you got 10 homes, you're tickling that 5 acre point. That's why I'm saying reduce it to I would say reduce it to 10 to 15.
Oh, you're serious? I mean, what do,
We'll wait for that.
I know, but that's why it has to be
well,
larger.
some of that's
and
not,
less homes.
but some of that's not our purview. So the well and septic, that is handled by the Oakland County Health Department if that's being provided on site. If they were to propose a community system, which some more elite systems or higher income subdivisions do say, we're gonna have a community septic system, or we're gonna have a community well system, depending on what the lesser of those two utilities are. Again, that's not us, that actually becomes a state asset that's evaluated for their state code requirements. What we do control is what those minimum lot sizes are, and they do go that small right now.
Really?
Madam Chair, forgive me for asking this question, but do we not have these reports already in our site development standards? No, that's why we're here discussing them today. Okay.
So it's related, but I am expanding beyond the
I had
initial
to get
scope.
past the fact that I just got done talking about solar, and then went into this community impact, started going, how's that?
So I'm going by article number,
Yes,
as
I
opposed,
see that now, thank you, I didn't realize that, but now I do,
okay.
okay.
Give you a break from the solar.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I based on, sounds like based on our zoning ordinance and the smallest lots that we are allowed, the 25 hits that 5 acre minimum, so it kind of matches up, aligns to that. If we went to 10 or 15 units, it wouldn't align to that, it'd be more like, you couldn't develop a 2.5 acre site like that. So,
Well,
I see where you're
I
going.
guess here's my point.
Okay.
Here's where I'm going, so we don't have to make 2 edits later. I'd rather package 10 to 15 and then address our ordinance at a later time, getting back to that minimum, like lot size, and getting that addressed. I don't want us to get off subject, but I think there's a few of us in here that would prefer a larger minimum lot size for subdivisions.
So, but along to that point, when we embed these in our existing ordinances, we're gonna be touching almost every ordinance.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so when you, like you mentioned, we'll have to go back later in the future,
We're gonna
it would have to be
have to-
done now. because
Yeah, we're gonna have to, we'll have to highlight, right, so when we're done with all this, we're gonna have to go back through our ordinance and clean the rest of it up, so everything lines up.
Well, part of this isn't, the intention is that the PC does have discretion. So when, these are the initial trigger points, in which we would say you can waive or not waive it. And that would be an item then on those site plan reviews, saying the applicant hasn't provided this information, dependent upon the seriousness of that, we would say we're not letting you see the planning commission until you provide us that. But if it were 10 units, more or less everything kosher, the applicant may ask, would you be willing to waive it? And we would make that decision at that point in time. Does that kind of help answer that question?
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think that's fine. I don't know, what's everyone's thoughts about reducing that number?
Greatly. I always thought if I have 45 acres, if I wanna split it up, I'd have to do 2.5 acre plots. And that's what it is. Now you're talking half acre, quarter acre, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Now we do have in this area places that have less than 2.5 acres, but I thought that was the whole point. You need that much land to make sure you get clean water and your septic field cleaned. And, 5 acres, 25 people, that's 62.5 acres at 2.5. And to me, 25 people on 5 acres, oh my lord.
So,
I mean,
so
if we
the,
get the septic field, okay.
yeah, because the REF, which I'm assuming that's your zoning, is the 2.5 acres. So that is consistent, but when you go down to the R1, it's the minimum lot size is 300 square feet. So that's the disconnect that when I've been poking around the master plan, that you are making it so you can have these really small, and there are already lots that are that small, but the assessor's hands are tied because if they meet the lot size requirements, they have to approve the split request, and then that's on you as the property splitter or buyer. Do you have is that enough to do X, Y, and Z?
So let's note it, so we're not going down a rabbit hole. Cause I have a feeling that as we go through this further and further, we're gonna find things like this that we're gonna wanna address in our ordinance, outside of alternative
I'll write it down under a miscellaneous.
Yeah.
So
That'll be
we can
something
circle
that we
back
can
to that.
Circle back and
Okay.
get that addressed.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
just one last comment on that. I'm more in favor of keeping it to 25 because it's less restricted, but that's why I just wouldn't put it that way.
I'm going for the small.
You're gonna go.
So 2 for 10, 1 for 25.
I have a question.
Everybody else?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Do we really have lots that are 300 square feet? in
I
this
can't do
township?
that.
No, okay. They can go that small.
No, I can't.
Well, not because of the lot splits or whatnot, but as far as the zoning ordinance, we let them go that big if they were to have all those facilities. Would you say that there's like mostly 1 acre? Is that the weird outlier occasionally? Some of those subdivision lots look extremely small.
They're all lumped together and included their common land, so it's split up.
Oh, okay.
So if it's like everybody has 1 acre, but there's enough common areas that lets everybody have 2.5 acres, that's how it's split up. So the common area is counted as a whole.
Gotcha.
Okay, so, again,
So we have 2 for 10, 1 for 25.
what do you?
I like 25.
Kick your butt.
2 for 2.
How many houses in that subdivision down the road here, getting close to town?
The old one or new one?
There's 2 of them.
I was
One of them's
thinking-
full, the other one's
Which one? There's 2 of them right
There,
there.
there's maybe 20, 25, but there are 2 of them.
That's the south side of Grange Hall, as you get close to town.
The other one, the one
That's
closer to
their
the fire hall doesn't have them.
They got only like 10 or 15, it's small, so.
17 and a half.
We're gonna split the baby.
15 would have been a better split.
Keith?
I like the 25.
Alright, so 25 is prevailing.
25 it is.
Okay. Okay, so kind of quickly going over content for each of these different components. So if we go over commercial, we ask for general stuff, talking about community facilities. So we're talking about police services, fire services, septic capacity. We're talking about truck trips. Again, some of these are talking about a little bit beyond just one specific use and trying to be over-compassing. Let's say if it doesn't have anything that has major truck trips, the person would say it's not applicable, I'm not expecting truck trips. So that's an acceptable answer to some of these when we're asking for this broad range of language, and still keeping it important. We cross-reference the traffic impact study, cross-reference the environmental impact. Then we go to social impact. We're asking about physical and cultural things around there. Is there any landmarks? Is there any historic components? We talk about increasement of employment. We talk about the economic growth because of that potential facility, marketability. We talk about the local tax revenue, though we don't necessarily like to make a lot of decisions off of that. That is a common question. That's part of it. It includes haul and construction route impacts. That is part of that initial review components. Then you have your traffic impact study. So I apologize for the typo I made on that, where I put Lapeer counties, but Oakland County was wrong municipal on my hat that afternoon I was drafting it, so I apologize for that. But this is relatively standard traffic impact study information that we would request. Then you have your environmental impact, where you're talking about water bodies, woodlots, wetlands, and provided this information. So typically, when these pieces of information are provided, they're provided, and then we evaluate them. If there's additional information that we need, or we don't think that it's adequate to answer that question, we can ask for more of that additional language or information from those different parties. So is there any other corrections there?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So on the traffic impact statement report, environmental impact statement report, Caitlin, these are both, what triggers this is when the approving body requires it, right? I mean, you're
So
saying,
they're-
when necessary, the approving body may require a traffic impact study in lieu of, or in addition to community impact. So they submit their site plan, who makes the decision of whether it's a,
So the same triggers we just talked about, because these are portions of a community impact statement, they would be automatically the same trigger. I just didn't duplicate the language. because we cross-reference these subsections in community impact statement. So the intention is the same 25 homes would be the same trigger for these reports. In addition to, I guess I always like to be abundantly open, is that if there's a use that doesn't meet those metrics, but we say we're really worried about traffic with this use, we can require that.
As long as those metrics trigger that, that's.
That was my intention.
I'd hate to be a developer coming into Danielle's office and say, you know, hey, I need to do this is what I wanna do, and then Danielle says, well, they may require a traffic impact, study, when we really do, you know what I mean? So save frustration that way.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I'm saying, manager.
Going back to your original letter, page 2,
Okay.
number 5, and it says, the planning commission may choose to waiver portions of a full impact statement. I don't like that idea. I mean, that's like my good buddies out there, and oh yeah, let's waiver this. Yeah, okay for her, cause you know, she's such a sweetie. I don't like that statement at all. I mean, that in a letter is bad. I mean, I know it's not in this, but that,
Well, it is. So we do provide discretion that portions or those full reports can be waived. My experience has been, because it's under the general provisions, there's so many different special land uses that are potentially asked that are 5 acres, but it's perfectly reasonable to have that level of intensity. So you're asking them to put together a couple $1,000 report that, especially when it's a special land use that's 5 acres, that's one of the triggers. And so that's why it's really common that you still have some waiver. One thing I could do though, that would make it more comforting, is we could say that there's standards for when it's appropriate for the planning commission. So as I just outlined, this is customary within the requested or the current residing zoning district. So if it's in industrial and it's a special land use, but it's customary with what we expect, maybe that's when it's appropriate to waive it. Would that make it more comfortable for you, or does it still make it uncomfortable?
something, because it sounds like, you know, there's my good buddy, let's, you know, yeah, go along, go along with me, that's my good buddy, okay? I mean, that's, just that statement, it just quivers my buddy. I apologize.
No, not at all. It's a valid policy preference.
Any? Go ahead.
My 2 cents,
Go ahead.
to your comments, Lynn. I see where you're coming from on that, but I also know that there are different uses that require different things, like, I'm trying to come up with in my head an example of, you know, oh, let's just use a solar farm, it's not gonna bring in the public, it's not gonna bring in anybody, would you do a traffic impact analysis for them? I'm using that as
Okay.
it may not require that traffic impact, because it's just utility workers going in and out of there, right? Whereas, the opposite would be,
A new Tesla
you know,
manufacturing.
I'm sorry?
New Tesla manufacturing.
A new type of manufacturing, I was thinking more of a bank, where you got people going in and out of there all the time, would require, traffic impact. So there are certain circumstances, depending on the use and the type of use, within the different zoning districts, that would trigger a waiver of that or not, and it's just a matter of doing that impact statement and finding out that information through the planning review process.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, so that's a perfect example of where we might want to waive a portion of it because we're not worried about traffic for a solar field, but we may be worried about the other community impact components or the environmental components.
Correct.
In which you do have the, it is discretionary, but it is amongst your peers as a planning commission. You'd have to have a consensus to make that decision.
And keep
So
in mind, we do that today, when it comes to like site plan reviews and things of that nature, we do that today with, or special land use permits and that, where there's certain attributes or requirements that, quite frankly, are, at times not applicable, depending on what the special land use is, for example. So, I think we do that today in terms of, we consent as a board to decide whether or not something gets waived. Go ahead.
Question, these impact statements, does this address both the the actual development as well as the final usage, like the actual construction of the site? May have different impact on the final use of the site.
So typically, the development impact statement is done as a preliminary pre-construction. When you talk about certain uses, we have pre and post-construction, so like noise standards or something of that nature, it becomes an enforceable line because we have a clear requirement. This is more informational, and that leads to conditions or requirements to help better say what is the requirement now. Once it's constructed, is it's doing its job? Does that help answer the question?
Okay, I'm thinking more of if the final use is a little more passive, where it's just something sitting there, no one's in, but to build that site, 800 cement trucks gotta go down Van Road, do they have to look at that impact, the construction of the place as well as the final usage?
I'm gonna say yes. I think I understand your question.
Okay.
So they should be answering those questions associated with it actually being fully implemented, the haul route that's associated with it.
We should probably make that clear up front. So whether it's,
Because we ask for employee counts, we ask for hours of operation.
no, I get that, but you read it, you would not know reading this.
Reading it, it sounds like it's finished use.
Yeah, it sounds finished, so you actually need some language, either prefacing before you get into these reports that, by the way, the impact reports here need to address construction and finished or post-construction.
Okay, and when we're talking about the construction method, is it mainly those haul routes or is it also noise nuisance of the
It could be
construction?
everything.
Well, so there's the line, is that we do not regulate typically, other than your noise ordinance, construction sites. So that might be going a little bit beyond what we should be doing in zoning, because that's when another ordinance takes over. So what part of construction are we regulating? Because haul routes, that has wear and tear on a public asset, we want to team up with our road commission to make sure that that's being, if you're causing the problem, you should fix problem. And so that's why we would want to know those, because for like wind turbines, they have to expand the road for turn radiuses because they just can't make it otherwise, and other big apparatuses. And that's the main impact for construction, is the wear and tear and then road improvements. So what is the other construction concern?
Okay, so those are covered by other,
Well, environment, dust particulates, that's another example. So I mean, that's not handled in another area of the ordinance.
So is the dust coming from road improvements? Because then that is where the road commission would be involved in
Just
their
general-
right-of-way
General
permit.
construction, you could generate, to me, environmental impact would be in there too. That's why I'm saying, I don't think you can pick and choose, I think it's an overall assessment from construction all the way through finish.
So that would be going beyond zoning typically. So most jurisdictions, we don't look at construction of new sites where there is some level of noise beyond the noise ordinance or dust beyond the dust component. The township has not taken that stance on any uses, so I would be cautious on doing it for some special uses. We just have to make sure that we're going about that the right way.
What's everybody's thoughts?
I'm in the construction industry, and we don't do that. These roads, Dixie Highway's being used by these gravel trucks all day long anyway, whether they're turning in right here or they're going another 20 miles, all that traffic is already accounted for.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, what about leading into the actual construction of the unit, so once they're on site?
Well, we should have noise ordinances anyways.
So you have a noise
Office of
ordinance,
Construction
I'm not as familiar with the Oakland County engineering spec standards, but most county road commissions have requirements regarding how much dirt comes off into the right, because you're in the right of way, you're making those improvements. And then you,
covers all that.
yeah, and then generally you do have some just public good neighbor stuff. So most jurisdictions, let's say if it's a new apartment complex, you're next to some single family homes, and then just, for whatever reason, they're just making a ton of dust and issues. Or they're demoing a bunch of buildings and they decide, I'm not gonna wet it down and do a dry demolition. That's a huge dust difference. And so It's typically better from an enforcement standpoint. We do have performance standards that handle dust, but that's more on a case-by-case basis, and then you just have, usually it's a neighborly conversation on enforcement to say, so you're really bugging your neighbor, is this really how you want to start this relationship? As the township, we're trying to have some people have a more harmonious neighborhood environment. So typically, that's not something zoning comes into that arena.
What is, any thoughts regarding this? Do we need to be more specific to make sure it's focused more on the finished product versus leading up to it, or?
Just from my perspective, say this is a subdivision, and you're gonna put 200 houses in there, and then you got 2.5 cars per house or whatever you figure for that. Now you've added all that traffic, that's where the traffic study comes in. If you gotta add a light, if you gotta have a decel lane or a left turn lane or something, all those things will come into play for that.
So it probably does need to have at least some consideration in an impact study, maybe just specific to traffic.
So, the construction itself is pretty heavily regulated.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, took the words right out of my
Okay.
mouth.
If
Between
it's
your,
not, the neighbors will come and tell you
yeah,
it's too loud.
between the soil erosion and,
And that's fair. I mean, I'm ignorant when it comes to the construction side, so that's why I'm asking.
yeah,
We have to wash streets and everything,
WRC.
so track out, you can't make a mess.
So, but again, we probably do need some verbiage to preface this, that, or at least in the traffic impact statement, that this is to be,
Because I have haul and construction routes, so that's where I say that we help with a little bit of the pre, because
but
that's where you have that asset
let's
problem.
Come out and say it though. I mean, let's just be a bit more direct. So, and you can just focus it on the traffic impact statement report section. It's just,
Like, item 4, Madam Chair.
yeah, go ahead.
Item 4 of the traffic impact says, to describe proposed traffic impacts of the development. Okay, pre and post construction.
Yeah,
You could say something like that,
make it direct.
but it just let them describe it. I guess I still am of the mind, quite honestly, that I think that the construction industry is regulated enough in there
We
that
don't need anything.
we don't really need it, but.
That's fine.
I think it's more important too, for if you've got roads, that are restricted versus unrestricted. Most of your trunk lines they're unrestricted, so there are a lot of roads that are not impacted at all by weight restrictions in the winter. There are some that are, and those roads aren't built to the same standard, so those ones will deteriorate faster, but the main truck routes and stuff are designed for that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, with that, we're going back to solar. So put on, I guess, your solar hats. I guess how I broke it out is similarly with on-site versus commercial grade. So I wanted to start with on-site first. And so this is general boilerplate language. You'll see this typically within the industry.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I apologize. 1 second. On your environmental impact assessment or road,
Yep.
you have dust control plan, you have those type of environmental impact.
Right.
Yep.
One thing that I know, and Pete, don't hit me on this, okay, Mr. Construction, but one thing I know is invasive species transportation.
Okay.
What's your plan on preventing those types of things from an environmental impact? Whether, huh?
Insects or?
Seeds, washing equipment on site, those types of things that during the development process, what's that environmental impact? You got dust control, but I wanted to throw that in there. I deal with that quite a bit, so
Sure.
don't hit me on that one, because I know construction industry, it's like, how you gonna make me wash my bulldozer?
Can I make one general
Sure.
question or something about solar, just the overall? I don't know if this is the appropriate time. It seems to be focused strictly on solar panels. Do we know that's the only, because I've seen other types of solar energy
Like
facilities.
heating, they used to do a lot of heating back in the 80s.
So they had one in California that was mirrors.
Oh,
It wasn't
yeah.
solar
Yeah,
panels.
that's
So
right.
do we know all the different kinds of what would be called a solar energy
Steam
system?
generation.
Um,
Look at
so,
meters heating a water tower and
so our definition of a solar energy collector, I believe, would include mirrors because it's the radiation of energy into electricity, either thermal or chemical. So again, whatever byproduct, however you're getting that mirror, I would argue is included as part of our solar energy collector definition. I can add mirror specifically to that if it would make you more
Since
comfortable.
this, I don't want them anywhere near this place. It's terrible. That was in California, they have mirrors focused on a water tower. And as you're driving down the freeway, you're like, it looks like a UFO or something.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Oh,
Just
I'm
Google
not,
it.
yeah, I'm not
Google it,
aware.
yeah.
So they were using reflective as a exterior light, not really as a power generation. Is that more
They were-
accurate?
They were reflecting light onto a water tower and that was then.
It might be using
generating
steam to generate electricity.
To
Yeah.
turn
That
turbines.
seems highly inefficient, but what do I know? Hmm.
But I
Okay,
just
let me-
bring it
let
up
me-
'cause I don't know what
sure.
solar,
Sure,
do we know what all the
Can we-
types of solar
Can
are?
we just specify that this is for solar panels and just be done with it,
Come on, Dan.
you know?
I think solar energy systems, like, I'm sorry.
well, let me do some question on the mirror thing, to see, if it's, clearly we can easily prohibit it, which seems to be
Yeah,
our,
that's what
our
I was
interest.
gonna
Okay,
say.
yeah, I
Is there a
will,
way we can just, we don't need to be blinding people in the process, because those are problematic.
but other than that, I guess as far as, other passive heat transfer systems or things of that nature, like if they were to have like a passive heat system with like warm water and drums or a geothermal, that's not directly covered here, but
I just brought it because I know of one other, and I like, I have no clue what they could consider solar energy system.
sure.
So the action is you're gonna do a little bit more research on that.
Yeah,
Kate,
I
and
wasn't
see
aware of that
what we can
method.
do to get a conversation with those or treat those special or what we wanna do. Okay, all right.
So with that, there are some different general points of information. What I highlighted, if you want to stop me sooner than that, but I was going to mainly focus on these major policy components, which each community more or less customizes to fit their community character. So the first one is when you're talking about the setback for commercial ground-mounted facilities. So as we talked about earlier, it is not an uncommon practice that you would relate that to your accessory building requirements, so I'm gonna pull those up real quick to ensure that I do not misquote it. But that's over in, I think, section 214, I think it's 10 feet, from the property line, if I'm not mistaken.
Please.
But let me
Yeah,
double
5
check.
and 20, and I don't like 5 and 20.
We're gonna,
Yep, so that is what you'll see, so some communities are more generous. Other communities say this is a ground-mounted solar facility. It has more of an aesthetic concern. I want it farther away than you could put an accessory building.
and this is for commercial, correct?
No, this is for on-site residential,
Or on-site.
typical, or it could be commercial, a zoned commercial property for on-site use, but not your commercial utility grade. That's feeding the grid. That's typically hundreds of acres.
Okay, that's what I wanna make sure.
Yep.
I'm not gonna interject, so folks have thoughts in terms of setback?
I think 5 feet is just ridiculous.
What is our accessory building for a shed?
So for an all zoning district, all detached accessory buildings shall be located a minimum of 10 feet from any other building unless otherwise noted. Let me find, if you have a special setback here.
I thought there was an accessory building setback
I
of
thought
10
that
feet.
was 10, yeah.
I remember dealing with it on ZBA, BZA, ZBA. Huh? Yeah, it was like that.
I think it's 10, I'm pretty sure.
Do you know what the zoning district is? Cause I think your setbacks change on the zoning
It
district.
was residential is what I'm referring to.
Okay,
I think the setbacks, you're right, the setbacks change per district, so residential might be smaller than commercial, correct?
correct. So if we're looking at our EF, I didn't see it quickly looking in 211 that some communities have special setback for accessories. Again, you can get closer, but the main building still has to be farther. Doesn't look like yours does that directly, unless it's in this section, which would be
Madam
awesome.
Chair, just
It
a
is.
general comment too. I think that, I think the solar panels in a residential or even commercial could meet the minimum accessory setback for each of those districts. At least at a minimum, you're interested to know what those minimums are, versus this range, cause I'm kinda with you, Lynn,
Yeah, I don't
in
know
regards to the
range.
5 feet.
Well, no, what I gave you was an industry customary
Oh.
range, not that you would do that language.
Okay.
It was intended to be,
Right,
really don't go closer than 5, but I wouldn't go more than 20, because right now, you're correct, it is the 10-foot setback for accessory structures.
accessories, I would at least have the minimum.
That's
For the
what
accessory-
I was
yeah, the
thinking,
accessory
is
structures, so
10
that-
feet, so,
So we want it to be the same, not different.
yeah.
I would
Yeah,
still say right.
Yeah, so shall be a setback at least 10 feet.
Well, just match the accessory structures for the zoning district. So like, in a residential, it might be 10 feet.
Correct, I would
In a-
cross-reference.
Yeah.
In a commercial, it'd be like 40 feet.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact ones.
Yeah, whatever.
Yes, because you do have special setback requirements for accessory buildings, even in commercial, which is also 10.
So it's 10 across the board.
More or less, but I would agree it's easier to cross-reference in case something changes somewhere. We're just mimicking that we want to have the same accessories. So all ground-mounted is considered a structure because it's above the surface. This would be further considered potentially a building because it has poles that then have a roof, which is the solar panel.
And that's
So.
easily defensible.
Yes, absolutely. That would be your default definition. If you wanted to be more generous, you would say, we're gonna let solar not count towards your accessory lot coverage, which is 2 down from now. So we'll get there. So next is talking about height restrictions. Some communities special, oh,
I think
sorry.
we skipped over number 2, having a solar array in the side yard.
Or rear yard, correct.
Yeah, I don't think it should be in the side yard, that's just my opinion, but I'd be
Is
totally
there,
offended if my neighbor put a solar panel between our houses.
is our language that way because some people are on a corner
Yeah,
or
I
they
think
got
it depends
their
on the
land,
lot.
their lot is hilly or whatever and they can't get on, in the back, they have to go on the side. Is that why we have it written that way?
So this is common,
Put it on the roof.
the most generous language is still to have it in the side or rear. Most communities don't allow ground mounted to be in their front yard. But some communities say we only want it in the rear yard. So I will double check what the definition for yards in a corner lot is to verify if there's a definition discrepancy, but it is literally a policy preference. And you're proposing to have it only in the rear.
On the side yard.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody else does.
We have our little schematics that define the size.
Yeah.
Correct, so once you have your principal building, anything that is up to the front facade of that building is considered the front. From that to the rear part of that building, those are the side areas.
So it's a smaller area.
Yeah.
It is a smaller area, and then the rear is anything from the farthest back of that building to the end of the property.
I would agree with you and just leave it, shall be located in the rear. And quite frankly, if there's a variance, let them go to the ZBA for a variance. If we get so many variances like the accessory building thing, where it's out of control, then we can address it then, but I don't think we're gonna see a whole lot there. And just my 2 cents on it.
We should look at our schematics we did last year, just to
Okay,
make sure.
just
There were
make
some,
sure.
some special lot descriptions.
Which haven't been adopted yet,
Oh,
Yeah,
because they were thrown back.
okay.
okay, well,
It's still a good reference.
Correct, yep, absolutely. So then the other question I have is, is this only for certain zoning districts or is this across the board? So if it goes into commercial, do we only want it to be in the rear yard or should it be allowed to be in the side?
The one commercial that I'm familiar with, that maybe not be, would still be considered on-site, but a commercial zoning would be the MSU parking lots that are covered. And,
Yeah, it's true.
which, I don't have a problem with that, I mean, it's a parking lot, and it, so I don't know where that would be located for, you know, that could be front of the building, so. I don't know if we're going to entertain that, or.
Chair, I think that from, in a commercial application, just I'm gonna go out on a limb here, but, because of, to your point, Dan, on the parking, could be around the side of the yard, side of the building itself, and it's typically, well, I don't even wanna say that, but, you know, usually these commercial or businesses are adjacent to another business of some sort, right? So you could have those in the side yards in a commercial or business setting. I don't know, such a small area depending on the size of the building
So
though too.
could we entertain this? Could we split it out, single family residential, it can only be located in the rear. All other zoning has the option of rear or side.
Cause you could have, let's say, an example of a gas station, the canopies over the pump station,
Yeah, yeah.
that's in the front.
Yeah, yeah.
We could have one of those, or even-
But that's not ground mounted, we were talking specifically
Yeah.
ground mounted right here. That's roof mounted, which is a different scenario, and that would be
Structure.
structure that could be in the, could be the canopy over the gas station.
Actually, isn't that considered a roof, the canopy over
Yeah.
a gas station?
Yep, it has poles that support a roof.
So again, could we do something like that where we split it out?
Absolutely.
What's everyone's thoughts on that? I guess I can just do a quick repeat, but for single family residential, they're only, that way, if it is a side, let them go forward with the variance. And then for all other zoning, rear or side, they have both options, yes.
So are we use space or are we REF and R1?
I think any family residential
Yeah,
district
any-
would be restricted to the rear only.
Yeah.
So is it
I-
the use or is it the district? So REF is considered an ag district, but also residential. Like you can have several single family homes in there.
It'd be the district.
The
Okay,
district,
so
yeah.
REF/R1, would you want to include multiple family or mobile home park? Or those are more commercial grade,
No,
we're
it's
not worried
more
about them?
commercial.
Okay, very good.
Well, what if I wanna put it in my side yard?
Then you.
I have a ton of acreage. Of course, I wouldn't get anything because I have too many trees.
If you
but-
wanna put it in your side yard, then.
You'd have to get
That's the only place that's clear of trees.
Then you come in with a variance.
And it's a hard variance to get. Because you are choosing not to clear trees to put it in the right spot.
I've been down that road before.
So that's.
And that's why some communities, they play with the setback, so you're not right on the property, and move it 20 feet, as opposed to playing the, which yards. They just say, we're gonna move you farther away, so you're less of a nuisance. Or you go into, which is later as part of this discussion, is screening. So some communities make you screen it, from your neighbor, or the roadway.
I'm gonna interject something because we're taking a long time. We gotta get through the rest of the agenda. So what I would propose is that we get through the rest of the ground mounted facilities. We put a plug in this and we stop and we reconvene for next time. Keep going. That way we can at least start having some dialogue regarding the remaining part of the agenda. Are we okay with that?
We should take this on.
Yeah. Okay, why don't we do that? So, we'll deal with number 5 and number 6 on B, and then we'll close this and move on.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Caitlin, do you have enough homework on that? I mean, for what we did tonight? with all of the stuff that we've given you information and,
So I think,
I'm sorry, I just wanna.
No, that's.
so I guess for B, if we're finishing B still in our dialogue, correct?
Yeah,
So the next, so there's 3 other major topics to quickly talk through. And then yes, that would be put a pin in it and move it from there. So I guess what I would argue one of the more or less easy options is number 3, which is the maximum height of a ground mounted facility. So you can have it whatever the district is, but it's very commonplace. 9 feet is the lowest you can possibly go for a solar panel for the maximum height. Up to 20 or 25 feet is the other common number, but it's common that you still keep it lower because these are otherwise not very improved structures, and so there's an aesthetic neighborly concern if they get too tall from that standpoint. So do you know what your maximum height would be for a ground mounted solar?
man, 20 feet sounds high.
Very high.
I would say 1 story, which is, 10 to 15 feet.
Yeah, that's what I would say is like 10 feet.
Yeah, but
20
9 feet
is
up.
Crazy.
You'd have to, 9 feet's the minimum, you'd have to give them some leeway
Yeah.
for the slope.
So we go from maximum tilt up, so that's your 9 foot or whatever for that
Oh,
component.
half, the midpoint of the slope, or?
So we do it based on the maximum tilt of it. There's a diagram in our definition section. What is the maximum height? That's part of
Okay,
that.
if it,
I think that was at the beginning.
Yeah, it is. It's like the.
I'm sorry.
That was at the beginning.
No, that's okay.
I have my pictures on it now.
But nine is the industry. Like you cannot go lower than this.
There,
I
you
would say
got it.
20 is
You
more
got it.
customary.
Oh, gotcha, okay,
Yes, that's right.
okay. Right at the beginning.
But yeah, some communities do the 10, some do the 15. That would be a fine number.
Definitely not 20. That's crazy. I mean, I'd be good with 10 or 15, just my 2 cents.
I'd be good with 15, because the maximum height's 15 on the solar panel, and you got a slope.
That's true.
And then you have
Yeah.
the low side could cause an issue with maintenance, someone knocking their head out.
And if they have to do something higher, again, let them come forward with the variables.
So next is talking about lot coverage. So we can also say we want to put a pin in it and think about it until next
Yeah, why
time.
don't we? So I was reading through this and this could take.
Well, I guess let me just make sure I explain it, and then that way you have something to mull over. So some communities consider solar energy facilities, especially ground mounted. As I mentioned, they have a structure, poles or whatnot that then support a roof, which is the panel itself. And so they count that against whatever your maximum lot coverage is for those zoning districts, or whatever you're allowed to do for accessory buildings. So that way you're not double dipping. Other communities say, well, these aren't really the same level of functional spaces. These aren't commonly used for carports, or accessory buildings are their own asset. And so some say, well, you can have these, but we're gonna restrict you by the amount of percentage of your lot. You can't have it be 25% of your lot. Others do square footage restrictions, talking about their solar array, because then you can always have building mounted if you wanted, but the ground mounted has a more aesthetic community character concern, which is why some communities regulate it. So we won't get into that tonight, I guess, but that's somewhat of that thought process, as communities do care about that. And then the last one is talking about screening. So some communities do require screening either from residential districts, residential dwelling units, 2 different connotations. So district is your zoning, if there's a building there or not, as opposed to a dwelling unit, is it physically there now or is it not? And then the public right of way, so you have screening. So there can be green belt, you can put in privacy fences. Usually you make it somewhat flexible, so then based on whatever the property owner wants to do is more or less approvable. And existing vegetation does count. So the intention isn't that they have to put up a whole new arborvitae screening just for the solar panels. If they already have woods on that side and they're proposing to keep it, that's sufficient. as part of that review process. Did you want to get into that tonight or no?
Madam Chair, if I may interject, I like where you're going with the, the length of the meeting and stuff. If I can suggest, or to our planning commission members, that we take these highlighted, things home and put their list together of what they think it should be and submit it to our zoning administrator for Caitlin's review and to kind of look at what we have in regards to those things. And then maybe, no, that won't work?
Well, I guess I'm trying to think of transparency and then the tabulation part,
Okay,
where, where-
strike that
then
Yeah.
where, I don't know that you're all gonna magically come to that, 17 and a half, right? And so,
I was thinking, or just bring it to the
Yeah,
next meeting.
you gotta be careful, but you can,
Okay.
but how about?
but yes, do your homework, write your
do
notes in,
homework, write your notes, and
if
then
there-
bring them to the meeting, so we can have open dialogue.
I did my notes already.
Do we have any more of this ordinance, like I know Bess is in here too as well? No,
so the,
we didn't even get into the
so,
Bess.
correct, and so cause I figured we're gonna try to get into this, commercial solar and BESS do have a lot in common. So as we get into the commercial grade facilities, especially now that we have more of those other impact reports
Yeah.
in there, I think that will help make it a little bit more of a even footing on what do you want to include or not include. But if there's anything that's of a major question where you want additional research or context, I know that information would be helpful for me. That way I can provide it ahead of the meeting or even in the packet potentially. So as you go through those different highlighted components, if there's a factor that you're worried about, I think that's fair to send to Danielle, rather than deliberating towards policy via email and then having to
Absolutely.
tabulate.
I realized the error of my ways.
Mark that one down.
A question along these lines, so I've been doing some research at home on the best stuff and various ordinances, which a lot of other communities have put a lot of work into it, and I have no problem using other people's work, Waytries and that stuff.
Correct.
So I've found maybe 3 samples of wireless from around the country that have some good information in them that's not in our drafts.
Correct.
What can I do with that to get that
Bring it forward.
brought forward or
Sure.
added into your notes or
I think what would help is if you took those 3 samples that you like those draft language and highlighted those and then sent it to Danielle. Because one of the things is that people are very creative. There's different state statutes that allow different ones to do different things. So
Right.
Indiana's done a really good job with some of their commercial solar stuff, but they're a different state and they have different levels of case law that's different.
Right,
And
right,
so-
I've seen that.
And there are other factors that I'm aware are in other communities, but I don't propose because they're not as legally defensible. If that's our line in the sand though, then that's what we need to talk about and then put that in the ordinance. So one of the provisions that you don't see for my commercial solar, some communities really like, is that you can't have a commercial solar facility be on 3 sides of a non-participating parcel. The idea being is that you're not the only one that didn't sign the agreement and now you're surrounded by a solar facility. But the problem is that is a very legal opinion based question and isn't customary, even though we can all empathize and sympathize with that being a horrible situation. That is not where it's the township's job in the same way to remedy that. But that's for our attorney to help us walk through that level of risk assessment if we want to say this is our line in the sand. So I think if you provided that to Danielle, she would provide it to me, we can have those contacts, and again, we can at least talk about that language.
Okay.
No, and why don't we, while we're talking about it, unless anyone's got anything else regarding the commercial solar piece, we wanna shift, unless there's no other comments, shift over to the BESS and at least just talk through, cause I know today we had, just to kind of put the preface around it, right? We started with a while, and it was called Draft A, ultimately, and ultimately we basically snuffed that out, set covering battery energy storage systems, in that. So draft A was a nice starting point, however, there were some areas of concern that, require addressing. I think back then there were some recommendations from the fire chief, regarding,
I think
some
those
areas
were,
to address too, that we were to look into as well.
but I believe those are all incorporated in that draft. And so I
Yes.
think the
Yes,
direction.
it was in that draft.
And so I
I'm
think,
sorry.
and so the direction I think would be really helpful for Bess is similar to, I guess, the commercial solar, is having it outlined what are our areas of issue rather than going through each individual line item again.
Yes.
Are there major policy concerns of the Bess that we already know we really want to readdress the setbacks? Just to make it easier so we can put our arms around the big stuff, and then have a more structured conversation.
Yeah, there's a concern around setbacks, and then also too, I don't, remind me with the draft A, I think we wanted to make sure, and I think it got incorporated in that latest draft regarding its setbacks, but then also too, the fact that it could not be, put near a school or certain there was a strategy around the placement of it. And I can't remember if that got addressed in draft A or if that was an area that we felt that we need to address at some point.
So PA
So
232,
placement.
PA 233 has like community buildings and has a very structured definition, which is typically including the places of worship, schools, things of that nature. So there is a setback for that. But that would be part of that setback rediscussion, is I would
Yeah,
kind of restart that and say, so this is what you could do within reason by reevaluating that.
okay, cause I remember that was a big one.
Sure.
Then also too, I think the biggest struggle that, cause I was on that little task force, with, and when we had the subject matter expert from U of M, and we were trying to go through and, come up with the initial recommendation of the WIO, for the very first draft. And one thing, and it came up time and time again, and it's a struggle, so at the end of the day, we're not all subject matter experts, especially when it comes to the safety and environmental impact. And I think there was a big struggle regarding that initial draft in terms of how to address the community concern regarding environmental and community, safety, impact when it comes to BESS systems. I think what you put together in the, regarding the solar systems could help alleviate some of that, in terms of forcing the issue regarding impact reports. So to me, that is something that I think, could get interwoven, when we get to the BESS section as well, in terms of those impact reports. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I think that's the intent of the development standards of the impact reports, is that whether it's the BESS, whether it's the solar, whether it's a commercial business, banking, whatever, that those impact reports will be made. So I think that would address it. I think, I'm not familiar with your draft A, but I'm looking at what, Caitlin's provided as an example, and I see some of the things in there for setbacks and stuff. A couple things that, I'm concerned on, just to let you know, when we talk about, are we talking about BESS tonight then? Are we gonna get into this conversation, or?
I think we're gonna touch lightly on BESS.
I think we're just listing concern areas.
Right.
That way we can come
Let's
back to
flag
talk
out.
conversation.
So we're.
Right, I have two
concerned-
concerns. One is, the, community safety service maintenance agreement. With these applications, how are some of these things funded, i.e. the training, the equipment, safety equipment, the personnel, the resources in which we're talking about here? Because I think, we communities, when I say we, I say communities undervalue what the cost of those things are, i.e. whether it's additional fire response personnel, or some piece of specialized equipment, or some training mechanism, or an on-site I think we really need to look at hard what those fees, whether it's an escrow that's set up as part of the application or whatever. I think that really needs to understand what that impacts are to community safety. And that if we're doing something in those lines, if it gets through the approval process, that we need to have some funding source for that community safety. We can't just eat that all up, with our current systems. That's one concern. Second concern comes to the reporting standpoint. We talk about post-construction reporting within the ordinance and stuff, and I think the concern that I have with post-construction is that it's just limited to post-construction. I think there's some documentation of maybe some annual. I would like to see an annual report or semi-annual reporting on the facility itself. I don't know what the metrics are for that reporting, but whether it's something's changed, something. Go ahead, Caitlin.
So I guess the question I have is this a compliance question? So I guess you would ask for an annual report that ensures, like, are you actually doing this amount of wattage, which is what you told us, or is it more talking about like environmental, like there hasn't been a major leak or something in a building where it's now having like leaching of different chemicals, and so that's the concern. Water usage, let's say if it's data centers or something like that, or
whatever helps us with not creating a liability for the township, but for an understanding of its operation, so that we know. I'm just going to put it out there. It could be near misses. OSHA's got statistics on near misses and stuff that you could say, somebody didn't switch on something correctly and it was a near miss where you had an arc flash or whatever. I don't know. I don't know all the metrics on it that we could legally request from the operation, but knowing those metrics so that we know, has there been any changes in the operations of that? And maybe that's applicable to our safety aspect of things. But having some type of reporting metric for the township, so that we can make sure that it's being operated as safely as possible.
Well, and I would even take it one step further, even outside the report, but getting back to the fact that the battery technology is always evolving. I work in this space on the automotive side, and it's evolving by the minute. So with that, I would even take it a step further where it's not just as plain and simple as once they get the approval, they're rocking and rolling, and if they want to upgrade their battery technology, they can do it point blank. To me, it does need to be wired in some way, shape, or form to say any technology changes regarding those battery units need to come forward, and there has to be transparency with the board and the community on what that is. As well as the timing. I don't know what that means in the approval process. I don't wanna get into that right now tonight.
Because they'll make changes, fire apparatus and everything.
Exactly, but I think there needs to be that type of scrutiny and review where, because of the fact it's evolving so quickly, we're not turning a blind eye to it. We are keeping informed, if there are plans in place to shift from one technology that they may be starting with to another technology.
Can I make a suggestion? Can we do it like a bond, like we do the gravel pits? That they have to have a bond, because if they have a big fire, or they decide to go defunct or whatever, the cleanup. I know that we're supposed to get 2,000 per megawatts, but will that cover the fire department, their equipment, their training? They're gonna have to train every year in case there is an accident. And again, if there is an accident, do we have some kind of a bond? Now, bond for gravel pits is if they go defunct, so we can hopefully make it profitable, the land. But a bond for solar or BESS or whatever.
I think that was in draft A. if I remember right.
There was a lot of discussion about that type of thing.
Well, we're not getting into the meat and potatoes. We're talking about what are our concerns so we can come back to those specific
So
questions.
Let's note that.
Yep, I got that. Yep, absolutely.
So I will say, if you read these other ordinances that are out there, they address all of these things. Some of them gone into great detail on the safety and environmental. There are battery technologies that are not allowed. And then augmentation is when they're updating their equipment, there are rules for augmentation of what you have to go to with the next technology. There's the bonds for the decommissioning. Some of these areas or locales or governments have done a lot of work. It's eye-opening what they put in theirs to address air quality.
You can even
Decommissioning.
mandate, cooling systems for the batteries too. I mean, you can mandate that it's you can mandate that it's immersion cooling only, and not water cooled. You could do, or cooling cooled, you could do that too, with an environmentally friendly, ester component. Or at least a cooling fluid that is not considered an environmental biohazard. And I've seen that, as a matter of fact, I wanna say it's California. There's one of the states where they're entertaining, requiring that these places are immersion cooling only, and they're not, and they're requiring with a fluid that is not an environmental biohazard. So there's no reason why we can't do the same thing. So that would be another area which would address a huge risk right there too. So that, I guess that's another concern, not trying to work it out, but getting into addressing the technology evolution as well as, looking into whether or not we need to put requirements in place regarding, the technology type, you know, from the battery itself to the cooling system.
Best comment.
Go ahead.
Would it be, appropriate to ask our fire department to kind of estimate what, you know, if there was this system in the community, what kind of resources they would need, you would need for those fire, I mean, just so we understand
So
what that
that's-
cost is?
So that's part of the fire emergency plan and emergency response plan, is that those estimates are supposed to be evaluated on behalf of the applicant. And then our fire department would specifically review those to determine adequacy, and then that would be part of that review and approval process.
But you're asking in this draft, a $2,000 per megawatt fee that I assume would be covering that. I'm not sure no?
That's just a reward for putting it here.
Yeah, that's over and beyond.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
interpreting that would be our fee to, you know, take in, you know, the additional need for resources for community safety. And I'm like going,
No, that's not.
what is $2,000 per megawatt?
So we'll talk about that more policy components, because there are some different nuances. We are not doing a CREO, and so there's different legal nuances to a workable ordinance, which we can go through, but
Okay,
there's different
I'm
answers to
concerned
those
of the cost
questions.
For the resources.
Correct.
stuff,
And
so.
the intention is those, evaluation of our equipment, and then not only just for our fire department, but for our mutual aid partners. That's the specific language we use, because we're not the only one that needs to have the capacity if something were to happen, everyone being ready to address that.
In the discussions at the board level, Westbrook calls that the community benefit,
Yeah,
The community benefit?
yeah, I think
there was
it's.
a whole list of
Yeah.
crap that they
It's a taxpayer dollar.
put in there
Try to
to
sweeten,
try to drive us.
yeah,
But
sweeten the pot.
But it's just, there's, Kevin's got a lot of data on that, on what's in those carriers.
So I think we have that punch list, so, I guess at a minimum, I would at least do a cover letter in, page number order, just then we flip through it, we address it at that point in time when it hits it. would anticipate that I can provide that letter for next meeting. I don't know that we'll get to it, but once it's done, if we don't get to it, it just carries to the next meeting. But at least we would, if we had time, could at least do that.
So,
Okay.
so let's do this. Because I know next meeting we'll be chugging along on the commercial solar. We'll come in with our homework and that and try to get through the rest of that. But for the next meeting regarding BES, if you wanna pull up those ordinances that you found and submit them to Caitlin, let's bring those forward, right? Highlight the areas that you want us to pay attention to,
Okay.
okay? And then I would say, let's look at those, as a next starting point. And then, I'd like to work these in parallel, but then also to make sure that we're taking whatever learnings for the solar, because that's the easier topic, right? Let's take the learnings from solar and see how we can also apply it to BES, right? Because at the end of the day, this is gonna be hardwired. And then hopefully, once we get through both the other, and I just wanna bring up one more thing before we close this, the other elephant in the room too, to address our data centers. And I don't know if we wanna put that under alternative energy.
Nope,
or
that's under
something
9A.
separate. Okay,
9A.
fair enough. Okay. Alright. Any other comments from the board regarding BES? Any other concerns to bring forward so we can get it out there now, so we start thinking about that? Okay. So with that, we're good, we're gonna go ahead and move on. So we're gonna get into the administrator, consultant, staff, and committee reports section, which is section 9. We're gonna get into the resident committee, data centers update. We got a nice, basically work plan, that was put forth. So,
Well, so just they're doing their work, they started meeting
Yes.
in May. We're anticipating in August is when they would come to the planning commission, provide that findings report.
Okay,
So then the tentative timeline from there is that we'd have this text amendment for about 2 meetings, September and October. And then hopefully we would take a intended holiday break in November, December, but if we don't finish, we're meeting in November, so think about it. And then hypothetically, we would wanna have the public hearing in January and adoption in February by the township board, partly because we do have a moratorium. And so this is something to keep in that timeline to show that good faith in moving along with that tentative timeline. So that's our tentative timeline. Of course, it's subject to revisions, but we're waiting for them to diligently do their reporting. We're expecting that to come in August.
Caitlin, can I say something, since I'm the chair of the resident action?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
you
you.
may.
I appreciate it, because I see I am on the agenda, and so I just wanted to address that. So thank you, first of all, for allowing us to participate all together. I think it's really important we're all working in conjunction with each other, so this has been a really productive meeting tonight.
Good.
Thank you for all of your work. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page of what is the Groveland Township Resident Advisory Committee. We're going to refer to it GTRAC, like going forward, because it's like a mouthful to say that every time, so we call ourselves GTRAC. The attendees, some are in this room right now. I'm chairing, but we have Stephen Reed, Tom Phillips, Carrie Smith, we have Eric Smith, Jeffrey Insco, and Scott Thomas. So they come from a variety of different backgrounds, executives at Chrysler to Eric works for Waitrim. I'm not sure if you know him, okay? And Jeff Insco is a professor at Oakland University. Scott owns his own finance company. So, and then Carrie and Tom have been greatly involved in all the community engagement portions. So it's a really good group. And our purpose, as we understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, we are to do the research and kind of filter out the facts, sort of, to use your terminology, tease out the facts, of what with regard to data center impacts, would be specific to our community and to the capacity we have available. So we're trying to be evidence-based and fact-driven, have balanced evaluation, and what's most important is the transparency and the public engagement. So that's why I wanted to get up and actually talk and speak for us. I think it's really important to build that trust again in our community. So we do have a say in this, and I think that's wonderful. We're all working in the same direction, which is, I think, terrific. So we're really here to strive for legal defensibility. Of course, we're not lawyers, we're not experts, but we're trying to do all that legwork that you guys have been talking about tonight. It would be wonderful, Caitlin, if whatever framework you had supplied the planning commission, if it's something we could have a copy of and kind of base how we present our information the same as you, I think that would be really productive. Would that be possible?
So I haven't drafted anything for data centers.
No, for what you just started talking about tonight with the bus and with solar. Because the framework, how you're providing it, I think it would be very helpful for the planning commission if it's consistent, if we're not throwing data at them in an inconsistent fashion, so they can be productive.
So I guess the question would be is, so there's the fact gathering that's associated and there's actually drafting of regulation.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so I don't know if, do you want to have all those pieces of information following that
You
together?
can just send me whatever you sent them and we'll kind of work it into the
Okay.
data centers, because it's very similar, right? Our process is very similar to what you guys are doing. We're just trying to help these guys move things along. I think we've all been kind of stuck. I think we can all agree we've been stuck. So we need that help and recommendations to get this thing moved forward, to get the best protections for our community that are, you know, compatible with what our capacities are and what our master plan is, what we want as a community. So that would be terrific if I could get that. And Keith, I have just a question for you. The source water protection plan, that's very important. You guys have not talked about that today. Super important protection for our community.
The source
Have
water
you got
protection
that?
plan is something that every building permit has that. It's, you've gotta protect your, we don't put anything back into the water. I think what you're talking
is
about
it-
is
is it-
wellhead protection.
Maybe that's it.
The SWIP, that SWPP is what we call it, though, that's governed on every construction project. We gotta put bags in the sewer
Okay.
grates and collect all that, we sweep the streets, there's all kinds of.
I think what I'm talking about is something a little bit on a larger level that would protect us most specifically with data centers, since they do use.
That might be a
tremendous
wellhead
amount of water.
protection.
So Kevin said you were working on that, and that actually is through Eagle.
It
the
wasn't,
source water-
that's not what I was working on, I was
Okay.
trying to get some testing, some baseline testing done.
Okay,
test
so
the
we'll
water
work
as it
that
is
in.
today.
I just didn't want to overlap if you were doing something there.
Well, and not to digress a bit, but I would think that would either fall under community safety or environmental impact.
Yeah.
Maybe in these like
Absolutely.
statement report sections that Caitlin outlined, probably in that area. I mean,
Absolutely.
because it looks like it would fit nicely in that.
So it'll depend on the purpose. So if it is
Right.
only for data centers, then it should be only
No,
in the
I-
data center section.
Yeah, I
But
think
it-
what we're saying, Caitlin, is it's for our community, right? We're all on wells, most of us are on wells, and we get our water from this aquifer. So we need something that's probably a little robust for our entire community. And really kind of goes beyond our community, but we can only do, you know, control what's here.
I mean, just to note, so the one thing that, and again, I don't know which impact report it would be, but for example, water usage, right? Because of the fact that we're on one aquifer, water resources are limited. So it's like, okay, trying to figure out where that would go, because that would have to go someplace.
Yep, so
Exactly.
that's under the
It's a
environmental report and it's not, so the intention is, the language that's used is talking about source and capacity. It's not going into a lot of specific matrix. Again, you can, and so that's just something that I know when you get to, is it use-based or is it in general for that community? So as long as
Yeah.
that's the answer,
It's,
yeah. that's fine.
I get you, I'm with you on that. So, last thing is, have you compiled a summary of the, the community event, from the master plan community event, have you compiled a summary of all that data that you collected that year since then? I know you guys are putting vision boards up, I think that's wonderful, you can get some more information to fill in the gaps. But some of the questions I've had in the last meeting is, how do we know where the gaps are? We don't have a summary, as far as I know, from
Yes, that
your
has already been
company.
submitted. I don't know if it was posted to the township website, but it's already
Okay,
been
when did you
developed.
submit that?
Oh,
Was that
it's-
recent? I'm just curious.
No, it wasn't recent.
No, it was back in March or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
We did
after
that.
the event, we did a quick turnaround, it was,
We
the
started-
initial report was presented, then it was brought back, cause there's some minor modifications to that, but no, that's
We
been
started-
submitted, so, yeah,
Okay,
pub-
so
We
that's
started
what
to
I
review
copy
it
of.
in
Do I get that
this
email
meeting
through
and
you,
stopped.
or who would I get that from? Because my understanding from Janelle is we did not have a summary at the last
You-
month.
you do. Yep, and I can resend it to Danielle if needed, so,
Okay,
yeah.
that would be great.
Yep.
Yeah, that's helpful for us, just building what we need to do, so
Sure.
that's great, thank you. Thanks again, everybody. Looking forward to working with that one.
So, any questions from the board regarding the resident committee? Summary, go ahead.
Why do we have this thing in this township?
Why do we?
Why can't we just say no? I keep losing track of why we can't do that.
You can, you can just say you don't, it's not compatible.
So if we don't list an ordinance, it's technically prohibited. The two-pronged issue for exclusionary zoning is, one, is there an appropriate need, or is there a need for it? And then two, is there an appropriate location?
And do we have
The-
capacity?
Well, that's part of the appropriate location. And so, the issue becomes is that the state has already said that this is a need.
Which law is that in?
Well, they've done different tax incentive plans, they've done I don't remember what the state initiative was, but when they talked about their economy plan and diversifying, and data centers is one of those things. And so that, again, we can draw lines in sand. We can also wait till those opportunities knock, and the answer is that we haven't addressed it yet, and if you would like, we can address it now, but we're gonna wait till someone knocks. That is what some communities are choosing to do, is waiting for a knock, and then we will go into that. Other communities are trying to be proactive.
There's many communities right now that are just issuing moratoriums. And I mean, that's my thought, is at the very least, a moratorium.
We
For
have a
a given
moratorium.
We have one
timeline.
until February
February.
2027.
I would even go beyond that, quite frankly, I would take it.
But you can't go, moratoriums cannot go forever. They have to have a very
Put an end date,
specific.
But
All of
it
these-
doesn't have to be
All these other
2027,
communities put their moratoriums in place while they're working on their,
right?
on their
And
ordinances.
we have a group that's addressing it, so I mean, we've got that. That's why I don't think 2027 is sufficient, I'd say put it out
I
to
think you guys are
2028.
working on this till 2040.
My point is, end of 2028, that's an election year. I'll leave it at that.
Do you guys not have a moratorium on right now? I thought you did until
We do.
February
You do,
2027. Okay,
but-
so
On
you
data
as a
centers.
township have a moratorium?
Just on data centers.
Just on data centers.
Oh, you didn't do it on data centers?
Is it just
Oh,
on its
you
own?
just did it on data centers? I'm
Just
sorry.
on data centers.
I'm sorry, I'm getting two different.
Yeah, yeah. So.
I'll say, I just heard recently too that one of them that they're planning in Utah is gonna generate its own power. Is that,
Many places require that.
Yeah,
They have to do their own energy and their own water.
and their own water, New Jersey does that. They have to have their own energy generation, their own grid, and they have to have their own water supply.
is there a big natural gas reservoir I'm sitting on or something that I shouldn't?
So, but yeah, it's,
And we can re-talk about what action you would like to take in August.
Okay.
that's fair. Yeah. All right. I think that we're good on that. We can move on. Okay, so the next one is setting obviously, we're gonna have commercial solar, we're gonna have, the alternative energy back on there, going back through the commercial solar. And we'll continue discussion on the BES. We have some example ordinances with some highlighted areas we can start talking through. So we'll continue that. Then also too, it looks like we've got site plan for Stevens Land Trust LLC as well as the Renaissance Festival. Does anyone wanna give any insight regarding both of those?
So we started the site plan for Stevens Land Trust. So we're still working on the first preliminary review from our standpoint. We'll be giving that to them hopefully this week. And so then we'll see what the revised plans look like to ensure that you have plans for your meeting.
And the Renaissance Festival?
Danielle, you'll have to help me.
Just an admin review.
Oh, it's just an administrative review, your annual
Okay.
one.
The annual, okay.
Do
Yep.
traffic impact.
Yeah, that'll be a mess. The other thing that I would like to suggest, and I know it'll be a hefty agenda, but we'll be beyond the point of, we'll be coming up on the deadline for the vision boards, right?
We're gonna evaluate what's, I guess what that turnaround is and what that date is. I do wanna
Okay.
keep that somewhat flexible with the township, so we can evaluate what level of response, if you wanna keep it out for another
that
part.
may-
Cause we can't do any more of the master plan until we get the
Right.
ending of the public engagement. So, we'll evaluate that, as far as if we get there. I know the master plan is a priority, for the township to continue to work on. But the future land use plan, as far as what we decide to do, I don't foresee it being a 15-minute discussion.
Okay.
And
that
so-
may be in July.
We'll keep that in mind as we look at the agenda. We must, for a, community component, do new business first, which would be the site plan, which would be Renaissance Festival. One thing you could choose is that we could prioritize the master plan over the alternative energy.
No, I don't think we wanna do that.
Okay.
At this point, no.
Okay,
Okay,
Question,
go ahead.
because there is no due date on the master plan, correct?
correct. We're not tied to a grant or anything associated with funding. So no, we don't have a hard deadline, other than it is a priority of the township board that we do want to proceed,
Right.
with that.
Alright. Anything else regarding committee reports or any comments from the board? Good. Alright, the one last section before we get into adjournment is public comments. We'll open up the floor. Just want to reiterate, the rules. So when it's public comment, we're not gonna respond to you. It's literally open comment for you. I'll take notes. 3 minutes, okay? And you cannot borrow time. I'll say that right now. And I will say one 3-minute section per person. And we are running late. Let's do that. If you got more comments, I would suggest that we get those forwarded to Danielle, and then that way we can review them. But for respect, to make sure everyone who wants to comment has an opportunity, they can do that. So let's keep the 3 minutes per person. Okay? All right, so, we'll go through and open up the floor. And it's a race. Well, and make sure you state your name first and your address, please,
Yeah.
okay?
Janice Ross, 7020 East Valley Road. A couple of things, when we were just discussing this, and, you mentioned that, Angela mentioned, and I've been at most of the meetings, I have a section of time when I couldn't come for a while, but I'm trying to get back at it. You mentioned, Angela, that the struggle distance, not near a school, but I just wanna inject the thought that, is it only just the distance, like 3/4 of a mile, or whatever? Doesn't it also consider the impact of, air and water quality for that school, which we have already discussed? I just wanna mention that should be considered, and not just a distance of, so much of a mile, but what if there is a mishap and a disaster, what is that gonna do for those kids that are in that school? The other thing is, well, you mentioned the state of Michigan has said these certain things are needed, okay? So first, is it appropriate, a need? The second is location. What about green space? Are we going to destroy green space in the name of, clean energy, and we are just negating the whole reason for it is to keep energy, our whole system clean, and we're destroying a green space. Okay, and the last thing is water protection. We're mentioning that with data centers. And what I understand is they use these volumes and volumes of water over and over and over, and then it gets dumped. And there are toxins and impurities in it. And we all know that we have wells here, and a catastrophic event is going to affect all of us in our heart. Thank you. Your turn.
I didn't have my hand up.
Oh,
Actually, I can. Greg Smith, 7015 East Hollywood. Caitlin, you mentioned about the percentage, or the solar panels, and for the board, and you mentioned it is a percentage. If the house is covered with 90% solar panels, which instead of saying how many solar panels, just put a percentage. If you got 47 acres of property, the most you have is 30% of your property with solar panels. I don't know, I'm making numbers up, but you might have to cut a few trees down. Again, use a percentage instead of actual solar panels. That's my thought. Which, I'm just bumping off the gate, I'm sorry. That's all,
Okay,
that's simple.
go ahead.
Carrie Smith, 7015 East Holly Road, married to this guy. I just want to say thank you to the board for your continued dedication and for your service to our community. Before addressing future developments, I want to follow up on some specific accountability commitments that were made by this board regarding our master plan. At our February 4th workshop, which was over 14 weeks ago, a significant amount of public paperwork and worksheets were compiled. The board explicitly stated that these worksheets would be publicly posted on the township walls for residents to see and review. I know that there was some recent waffling on whether or not to do a follow-up 5-question survey, and at the last meeting it was decided not to move forward with that. However, the promise to physically post those February 4th workshop worksheets on the walls here for accountability purposes still stands. Almost 15 weeks later, they're still not up. My questions for the record are, is there a specific reason this was never done? Or, if they were posted, for what specific period of time were they actually made available to the public? While we're on the topic of transparency and public documentation, I also want to address the potential for future large-scale infrastructure in our township, like energy storage systems or data centers. As we look at potential future infrastructure and economic development in our township, transparency is very important to our community and its residents. In the interest of maintaining open communication and transparency regarding upcoming infrastructure and energy storage system proposals in our area, such as were discussed tonight, I would like to ask a foundational question. To ensure our community remains fully informed and to dispel any rumors or misunderstandings moving forward, have any individual board members signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding prospective developments, corporations, or energy projects in our township? So that our residents do have a clear understanding I would deeply appreciate it if we could go down the line, so each member could briefly answer with a simple yes or no, which is obviously your choice, whether you sign such an agreement for the public record. I do thank you for your service. I do appreciate your time, your clarity, and your commitment to transparency.
Under three, good job.
Just to answer your question, Carrie, the board, passed a ban on NDAs, so we're not permitted to sign anything.
Thank you.
That was back in January, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, yeah.
I might have missed that one.
I missed one.
Thank you. Any other?
Just a quick question. Robica Phillips is my name. I live on Water Road. We communicated email addresses, and you questioned how you can inform the population to react to what's happening. Can we finally receive questions to the public through those emails that you already have?
Public comment.
I wanna just make, I'm just gonna ask, just to make sure I understand. Can you repeat, ask if you can receive questions through your email
Or
address?
inform the population through the emails that you already have. They were collected at the February meeting, and every time we need to access, every time I look for information on this website, I am required to put my email address. But I don't receive any information through that email from you.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
thank you.
That may be a Janelle question. I know she's been working on
Not us.
getting something together for mass communication. I'm not sure what that looks like yet.
Keith, you're the only one that's ever emailed me.
Got it. Anything else? Anybody else? You good? You getting tired? Yeah. Okay. Alright, so with that, we'll close public comment. Which leads us to our last item, which is adjournment. I can get a motion.
I make a motion, we adjourn for today.
Second.
Stumka.
So
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Auf Wiedersehen.